Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, post-match. Carlos Alcaraz versus Daniil Medvedev, US Open 2023 semifinal. If you're not here for spoilers, click off the video in 3, 2, 1. Despite getting smoked by Alcaraz in the first two meetings this season, Daniil Medvedev turns the tables, wins in 4, and advances to the US Open final, where he will face Novak Djokovic in a rematch of the 2021 final. Yes, this happened to be a result that, because of what the last two matches looked like, was surprising. But when you also think about it and you take yourself away from that, then it doesn't look quite as surprising. A guy who is number 3 in the world, a guy whose best surface is hard court, whose best major has been the US Open, a guy who not only is 3rd in the world, but who is power ranked 3rd coming into this tournament, taking into account even the results, even though it was a tough summer for him. So in that respect, less of a surprise. But what I really want to talk about in terms of resetting how we think about Medvedev Alcaraz, as this match will force us to do. The reality is, before they played at Indian Wells, I did not know that it was going to be a bad matchup for Medvedev. I don't even remember who I picked, but I do remember how I felt about the matchup. And I do remember thinking, okay, there are things here, maybe not on a court as slow as Indian Wells, but there are things here that Medvedev does, that Medvedev is good at, that actually should be able to work against Carlos Alcaraz. And the reason why those things were put aside was because the two times they played, those things didn't even come close to playing out, not even close to happening. Because that's how I think about matchups. What are the paths to victory for both players? It's how I do my previews. It's how I think about my matchups. And I found paths for Medvedev really pretty easily. They just didn't come close to happening. They happened this time. They happened. So let's get into it. It's not a very sexy thing to talk about, but Medvedev's first serve wasn't coming back all that often. It was completely neutralized at Indian Wells. It was completely neutralized at Wimbledon. He got a lot of free points. And when he didn't get free points, he got a lot of sitters. He got a lot of short balls. A lot of forehands way inside the court. And it was pretty surprising to me that Alcaraz never moved back. He started blocking his returns a little bit more late, but there were not a lot of games like the third set where he made a lot of his returns when he broke serve. They were not high quality returns. He just got them in. They were short for the most part. And the way the Alcaraz break of serve of Medvedev, which I think was his only break of the match, and it came at 1-2. Medvedev got generated short balls off his serve. He hit approach shots. Alcaraz would just scramble and basically take advantage of Medvedev's mediocre volleying by executing two-shot pass patterns. That was essentially the break of serve. So when the serve was coming back, Alcaraz did show that his defense and his scrambling ability was potentially good enough to manufacture a break or two or three, but oftentimes it wasn't even getting to that point because Medvedev's first serve was so dominant in this match. On the second serve, Daniil was certainly also good enough. He double faulted 10 times, and he still won 50% of his second serve points. That's pretty good. That's pretty significant. Alcaraz's game plan was, just like it was against Zverev, to be ruthless in attacking the second serve. Stand very close hit very hard, and even come in sometimes right behind it. That was the plan. That plan might have cost Alcaraz the first set. Not because it's not a good plan. Heck, if I were coaching Alcaraz, I would have told him to do the same thing. Medvedev's second serve has seemingly been one of the more vulnerable parts of his game, and I would put as much pressure on it as possible, especially because Daniil's defense is not as good after he just hit a serve. But if you look at Medvedev's first two service games of the opening set, Alcaraz actually was making some good returns off of Daniil's first serve. Medvedev was actually missing a lot of first serves. Alcaraz was winning some points from the baseline. And as a result, he had chances. Both games went to deuce. He had 2 break points in one game, but he missed so many second returns that he couldn't get the break. He couldn't jump on Medvedev early on and take that early lead, which would have been even more significant considering the history of the head-to-head. But I'm seeing a deuce point at love 1 where Alcaraz missed a forehand return long. And then on the next game at 1-2, I'm seeing 2 in a row. Break point at 30-40. Alcaraz shanking a forehand return on forced error. And at deuce, another forehand return that he doesn't hit cleanly and misses. So he's standing in, he's trying to take it early, just not hitting it clean. Medvedev maybe making a point to go to Alcaraz's forehand, feeling like if he's standing that close, I can rush that return in particular. Maybe. But that really cost Alcaraz early. And then as the match went on and Medvedev started to feel pretty confident on his serve, that's when he started mixing in the really hard, fast second serve to Alcaraz's forehand. None bigger than in the fourth set at 1-1. Here's another chance early in a set for Alcaraz to break. He had 15-40, but this was at 30-40, and Medvedev comes in with massive heat. I wrote it down. 125 miles per hour on a second serve, break point at 1-1 in the fourth to get the service winner. And there were a couple of moments there where Medvedev was able to come up with that, and there was only one moment where I can recall him double faulting, which was on one of the match points at 5-3 in the fourth before Medvedev ended up closing the deal. Most of Medvedev's double faults, mind you, were in the first set and at 5-3 in the fourth. I think vast majority of them. So I think the 10 double fault number, I don't think it cost him at all. Not even a little bit. Remember, I think you got to look at that stat and you got to understand, okay, did it have an effect on the match? And if you double fault 3 times and still hold, like Medvedev did in his opening service game, it does tell you something. It does tell you something, but it does not tell you that that the double fault number is a number that played a significant role in the match. Another thing, before I get into some of the baseline patterns that we should talk about, is serve and volley, Alcaraz's serve and volley. And one of the main storylines here was obviously, is Medvedev going to make some sort of tactical adjustment to disrupt Alcaraz serve and volleying and Alcaraz hitting, the serve plus drop shot and the serve plus approach that's so effective. There was no adjustment here. And I think big picture, I don't think I've said it yet, so I'll say it now. I don't think this match was as much about Medvedev adjusting tactically as it was him executing better tennis and Alcaraz executing at a lower level than he did at the last 2 matches. I think it was mainly about execution and also maybe some tactical mistakes even by Alcaraz, which we'll talk about. Yeah, mainly just about how well Medvedev was playing. Less so adjustments, in my eyes. And the serve and volley was a good example. I thought Alcaraz's serve and volley was unbelievably successful. Stats bear that out. Watching the match bears that out. Medvedev winning this has very little to do with him figuring out how to beat Alcaraz's serve and volley. Now, in the second set, did Medvedev make a couple big returns at 1-4 to break for 5-1? Yeah. In the fourth set, at 2-3, when Medvedev got the break of serve that would end up winning him the match, did he win a couple of points late in that game off of Alcaraz's serve and volley? Yes. He even saved a game point by hitting the outside of the line on a backhand return cross court. That was a clean winner. But ultimately, Alcaraz missed a pretty easy volley on a game point to knock it out of the game. I'm talking, this must have been after maybe deuce number 7 or 8 here that I'm talking about. And then he missed another forehand volley that was kind of a difficult one, but he missed it so badly that it was pretty surprising. And then on break point, Alcaraz on the ad side hits a kick out wide. Pretty bad kick serve. Pretty easy return for Medvedev to just hit it low at Alcaraz's feet, and Alcaraz couldn't make the half volley. So there was definitely a string of points there that Alcaraz serve and volley failed. One of them was a pretty routine volley, so it wasn't really much that Medvedev did. But in general, it was just a really effective tactic. What struck me was that in an ideal world, I think Alcaraz is using it much more so on the deuce side than on the ad, because he has the slice wide on the deuce side that really gives Medvedev a huge problem. But I do think because Medvedev was beating him from the back of the court, that's where Alcaraz started hitting the kick serve on the wide, on the ad court, the kick serve out wide, serve and volleying off of that, and it's just not really as effective. So when I'm pointing out some of these plays, I think 3 out of these 4 points I'm pointing out on the ad side that Medvedev was able to win off of Alcaraz's serve and volley. What's significant to me is not that Medvedev made some sort of adjustment, but rather that Alcaraz felt the need to serve and volley on the ad side where it's just not as effective. And I'm curious to see if he did it more on the ad side in this match compared to Indian Wells and Wimbledon. I think yes, which has to do with what was happening from the baseline. So let's talk about what was happening from the baseline. For me, the MVP was Medvedev's backhand down the line. He just had an incredible feel for that shot in this match, and he made sure to hit it whenever he had the opportunity to do so. And that was just a shot that Alcaraz looked much slower to cover compared to every other ball. Is it because Alcaraz is always kind of cheating left a little bit to find forehands? Maybe. Is it because Medvedev's backhand down the line is exceptionally difficult to read? I think so. I think that's a big part of it. But it seemed like that shot was unbelievably precise by Daniil, and it was the shot that Alcaraz was a step slow getting to over and over and over again, not to mention the forehand on the run. Alcaraz misses that a good amount here. And even if he doesn't miss it, that's where I think Medvedev was getting into a good rhythm of just change, like change direction to keep Alcaraz moving. He does that really well, but it's got to start somewhere. I think it often started with good backhands down the line, and then you have Alcaraz forehand cross, Medvedev forehand down the line change, and what Medvedev wants is an open court to change down the line into, and he wants pace to work with. So Medvedev backhand down the line, Alcaraz forehand cross on the run, usually pretty hard, and now Medvedev forehand down the line. He has everything he wants. He has open court, he has pace coming in, and now he can change direction into that open court to create offense. Medvedev's forehand was, and it has been all tournament long, looking really good. And that's the big barometer with him. That's what had me so excited about his game in March and April through when he won Rome. What had me so excited about his game was the way he was able to generate and damage on the forehand. And I thought it was because, or I think it was because, he made the adjustment to his technology going to the softer string. Now I don't really know what to think because that went away for a while. It's a big problem in his loss at Roland Garros. It was not something that was working very well for him at Wimbledon, the forehand. It was not something that was looking great this summer, but it has looked good in the De Minaur match. It did look good in the Rublev match. His ability to take forehands inside the court and cash in from those advantageous positions by doing point-ending damage. Very good. So those things helped him from the baseline. What hurt Alcaraz from the baseline, in my opinion, was playing much too fast. Not taking pace off, not playing with the same measured patience that he had against Medvedev in his previous 2 meetings for some reason. In the first 2 sets, this was a problem consistently. Very consistently. And it was a problem in big moments in the 4th set. Alcaraz had a 40-15 lead in the 2-3 game. And Alcaraz made a forehand unforced error from the middle of the court going wide, which was a very, very bad error with his forehand. When Medvedev gives you a backhand with no pace deep right through the middle, what Alcaraz had done in the past was just basically do it back. Now, maybe that's a little harsh because it wasn't the worst ball to attack. But look, forehand unforced error on that ball. 40-30, much worse case. That's the point where if I had video to show you, that's the point I would show you with Alcaraz just completely losing the plot on what he was doing to Medvedev in the previous meetings, which was taking pace off. This was a forehand rally where both were hitting very, very hard and grunting really, really loud, and it was getting louder and louder and louder and harder and harder and harder until Alcaraz missed really, really badly. And it was like, oh, talk about getting suckered in. That's exactly what Medvedev wants. He wants Alcaraz to be trying to hit the ball 100 miles per hour. That's what he wants. He loves that. The more he gets that, the better he's going to play. Against, what he was doing before against Daniil was very, very solid, very patient, no unforced errors, and finding the perfect moment, being very selective of when to inject that pace close to the sideline and then come in. Not ever give a lot of pace for no reason. Because if you give Medvedev pace, it helps Medvedev miss less. It helps him create more openings, open up more court. And it also makes Alcaraz obviously more erratic because he's trying to hit the ball harder. Very, very simple. So the baseline unforced error difference, or the baseline consistency difference, was a thing in this match. It wasn't a thing in the previous 2 matches. Remember how I started this video talking about how there were paths to victory for Medvedev and they just didn't end up playing out. Well, the 2 that I really discuss is first serve effectiveness or first serve damage discrepancy and baseline consistency discrepancy. Those are the 2. That's where Medvedev finds his advantage. And before they ever played a match, it was completely reasonable to expect that Medvedev have those 2 advantages, but he didn't. And that's why it became so hard for us to figure out how Daniil was going to beat Carlos Alcaraz, because those advantages just didn't exist, but they existed in this match. You look at the unforced error count here, and it was only 38-32. But I think that's kind of misleading because Alcaraz was living at net. He was at net 70 times, 54 for 70 at net. And when you come to net a ton, you end up not getting hooked for unforced errors, right? They don't score unforced errors. Medvedev, who's staying back way more, 38 net approaches, that's that's less than, well, no, it's not less than half, sorry, but it's in the vicinity of half of what Alcaraz did, he's going to make more unforced errors. So I think if you took the baseline rallies and you made a percentage, what percent of baseline rallies for Alcaraz ended in an unforced error? What percent of the baseline points for Medvedev ended in an unforced error? You'd really find that advantage for Medvedev. And arguably, that's mean regression. Meaning, arguably, this is how it normally should play out when these two play. And the fact that it didn't in the last two was kind of the weird part. But I also think it's somewhat up to Alcaraz to play a little bit more patient. Or maybe Medvedev was creating so much pressure and so much damage from the back because he was playing big off of his forehand, because he was going down the line more often off of both wings, but being exceptionally effective doing so off the backhand. Maybe that is what made Alcaraz feel the extra pressure to just play with more speed and more kind of unnecessary, or unnecessary is a loaded word, but I guess more risk, more pace. Medvedev's baseline play also definitely got Alcaraz to play some bad drop shots. Daniil's defense was so tough. He was keeping the ball so deep. It was just such classic Medvedev baselining where it's really hard to find any way to win in any opening without working extremely hard and patiently working the point. And there were some massive moments where Alcaraz definitely played some bad drop shots. And Medvedev, as ever, is really good when he can get to drop shots. Lastly, I'll end it on this. Daniil was amazing mentally in this match. He deserves tons of credit. He was incredibly steady emotionally. Never got negative, including in the third set, and got right back to work in the fourth. And just seemed to have a laser focus. Never really had a lapse. So this was a throwback to a very, and I don't know when's the last time I've seen it, very machine-like, laser robotic focus from Medvedev in this match. It's been a while since I've seen that. Alcaraz, I do have some bones to pick. The Love 1 game in the second set was really, really bad, where he was up 40-30, made a forehand unforced error. Then he had a service winner at deuce, but then he made a backhand unforced error at add-in. He made a backhand error off of a pretty hard return down the middle, so I didn't say it was unforced, at deuce. And then he had a forehand drop shot miss, wide open court, down break point. So it's a pretty bad string of points there, where the only point he won was a service winner, and then other than that, it was errors from the back very, very quickly. That was a letdown, and it felt like the first set kind of snowballed on him there. And then the fourth set, you can't really ignore the unclutchness. The fourth set was not a set that Medvedev dominated. And it was a set where Alcaraz, after the first two sets, I do think, with the exception of a couple of lapses, was playing the right tactics more often than not in terms of, staying solid enough from the baseline and giving Medvedev some slow stuff. And actually doing better attacking the second serve, much better in that department. And it earned him some chances. But he was 0 for 6 on break points. And in the game that Medvedev broke serve, Alcaraz had 7 game points. So you look at that stretch from 2-3, or from 1-all, and then to 2-3, and then even when Medvedev was trying to serve out the match at 5-3, there are multiple return games and a big service game in here where Alcaraz had multiple chances to win the game and didn't. So it was a pretty unclutch fourth set from Alcaraz, and a clutch fourth set for Medvedev. And the big points were really pretty lopsided if you look at how that fourth set played out. So that is the anatomy of Daniil Medvedev's victory over Carlos Alcaraz. I'll have analysis of the final, a preview of the final tomorrow, as well as a post-match analysis of the women's final. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.